You also talk about the use of code words that these evangelical leaders use and commentators on radio and TV use that will push the buttons of these people. And on that same point, that the evangelical leaders will have one face in the public, and when they go behind closed doors, they'll have another face, which really promotes this crazy side.
Well, I give an example of the two-faced, the public face and the private face in an encounter with someone who's now passed away, and that's Jerry Falwell from Lynchburg, Virginia. I remember I was preaching from Jerry Falwell's pulpit, and my dad and I were both down there, and before the service, Jerry had us in the pastor's study. We were talking. The issue of gay rights, homosexuality came up, which, just for the record, neither my father or I ever were part of the homophobic gay bashing part of this movement. But nevertheless, it came up, and Jerry Falwell said, not joking, with absolute seriousness, if I had a dog that did what they do, being any gay person, I would take him out and shoot him. And he wasn't kidding around. That's his view. And if I had quietly said to him, oh, I know someone who did that, he would have said, good on you. These are people who, in private, whether it came to the bombing of abortion clinics or gunning somebody down, basically didn't have a moral problem, though they would not themselves do it because the stakes would be too high, he had too much to lose. Nevertheless, the kind of rhetoric in private was not reflected in their more public statements, which always sort of had this smarmy, hate the sin but love the sinner, blah, 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 blah. In private, a lot of these evangelical right-wing leaders were tough as nails, homophobic to the point of violence in terms of what they believed would be appropriate. And in the case of the theonomists and the reconstructionists, of people like Rousas Rushdoony, who, by the way, is not a household name, but had immense influence in a lot of these evangelical groups in terms of writing books and reports that became the foundation for a lot of these people's thinking, they went to the next step and said, we need to bring America back to Christ to the extent, quote unquote, that Old Testament laws about stoning homosexuals to death and this sort of thing should be revived and applied. So, you had within this group people who were actually saying what they were thinking. Then the big-time leaders, like Falwell, like Robertson, would not tell you what they were thinking in public, but in private they did, and I heard it because I would meet with them. And you saw a little slipping of the mask after 9/11 when both Falwell and Pat Robertson said, well, America deserved it because of our gay rights and abortion, and so this is God's justice. That's where you saw who those guys really were at one moment. Then, of course, within moments, they were backtracking, saying we didn't really mean that, because that's not what they wanted to say. But that is what they wanted to say. And that's their view of this country. That's how they think of people in the medical industry who would think abortion is okay. That's how they think of our Supreme Court justices. That's how they think of our government. That's how they think of America. And so I think that, again, I just want to repeat it because I think it's important. People tend to think that somehow from the left and the progressive movement or the peace movement that you had an anti-American strain. Nothing compared to the anti-Americanism of right-wing American Christianity. These people hate this country. They hate this country the same way Al-Qaeda and the Taliban hate America. They'd like to see it destroyed. They'd like to see its leaders killed. And if they had the courage to do it, they would be doing it. When someone does pull the trigger, they do exactly what happened after Dr. Tiller was murdered. The ones that show up are there with signs saying, God brought the killer. Then there's another wrinkle that I just want to get into that I talk about in my book a little bit. And it's a really dangerous wrinkle that you can see a little bit of the tip of the iceberg in this book called the Left Behind books, these novels all about the return of Christ and the apocalypse. There's a whole group in this America-hating right-wing fringe that actually is rooting for the apocalypse, believe this or not. And the problem with telling people this is that if you're sane and you're an ordinary American, this sounds so far-fetched and crazy that it's hard to take seriously. But it is serious. The Left Behind books have sold millions of copies, these novels, and what they are is violent revenge fantasies in which evangelical Americans are vindicated and proved right because Jesus comes back and kills all their enemies, which is what the apocalypse is. And that includes all the Jews in Israel, except a handful of completed Jews, in other words, Jews who convert to be Christians, who are believers. The rest all must die. This is what they're looking forward to. This is good news to them. So as I say in my book, one of the reasons I got out is when it dawned on me as a younger man that I was part of a group to whom bad news was good news, and good news was bad news. I'll give you an example. If abortion rates or teen pregnancy or sexually transmitted diseases or crime went up, that was good because it meant that Jesus would come back that much sooner. It also proved us right because we were saying the culture has gone away from Jesus and so all bad things were happening. If crime went down in New York City, a place that was dominated by those secular, uncompleted Jews, that was bad news. How can crime go down? They believe the wrong things. They haven't accepted Jesus. How could anything good happen to them? When it comes, for instance, to Middle East peace, this is a group that dovetails with the neoconservatives. They are a party of perpetual war. It's good news to them when Gaza gets shelled and the Israelis bomb them with phosphorus and hospitals and children get burned. Because this is the kind of chaos that will create Armageddon, bring Jesus back, take all believers away, and leave the rest of us to be incinerated by Jesus. People don't get this. But the fringe of the fundamentalist Christian movement that believes in this vision of eschatology, which is this idea of the end times, into this volatile anti-American political right-wing mix, you have this loony mix of people who literally read the newspaper and watch television and go online every day looking for signs of the times, quote unquote. The more violent, the more unhinged, the more chaos in the world, the better as far as they're concerned, because it's all signs that Jesus is on the way back. They're going to escape in the rapture. Everybody else must burn. When you look at that kind of when you look at that kind of ideology, you combine it with the right-wing politics that you see in the far right of the pro-life movement or any of these other fringe movements that spin out of evangelical Christianity. Again, it doesn't take much imagination to realize that in this mix, there are some very dangerous individuals that can be extruded from this what is essentially not just an anti-American viewpoint, but an anti-human viewpoint. Because these people, in essence, so despair of and disparage the whole human race that they're literally waiting to be lifted out by God so that all the undeserving human beings, in other words, anybody not exactly like me, will now be killed. And again, it sounds jokey, it sounds crazy, it's so kind of fringe that it's hard to believe, but it's not far-fetched. If you look at their material, if you, for instance, watch on TV these evangelists like Jat and Rexella Van Impe, or if you look at what people like Jerry Falwell were preaching, or you look at what Pat Robertson's been saying for years, it's all there. And so again, when it comes to people like Eric Holder and the Justice Department, it isn't a question of criminalizing faith or limiting free speech, but it's taking seriously the fact that a group of people who believe Jesus is going to come back and kill everyone but them, and are rooting for it, a group of people who believe that abortion is murder and therefore it's licit to gun down doctors, a group of people who think that God, quote unquote, hates fags, and this is their religion. It doesn't take much of an imagination to understand that out of these groups will come some very dangerous individuals. And it's just a question of playing Russian roulette. Once in a while one goes off and you take a bullet. And again, I think having an African-American president and a progressive agenda in Congress is going to push a lot of individuals in the next few years over the edge to take violent actions. And I think we see that already coming true in what's happened since Obama was elected. So I think it's a serious threat.